And at this session, we will share experiences and knowledge from the heating and cooling sector in the Nordics. And we'll do that through a concept that we call Prosumer Energy Network. And we will also hear how the concept is deployed in Stockholm. And after sharing these Nordic experiences, we will discuss if some parts of the Prosumer Energy Network could be adapted in a New York context and how. And so my name is Ann-Sofie Gaverstedt, and I work for the company Urb Urban System, and I'm also the chair of the Swedish industry trade organization Urban Sweden. So, and you have the possibility, of course, to ask questions during our dialogue in the chat, and we will bring them up in the end of the session. And I would ask everyone that are not speaking to remain muted and also close down your videos if possible. And I also want to inform you that we are recording this event, so we can share this knowledge and experiences with others. But before starting the dialogues, I would also like to thank our support organization, that the Consulate General of Sweden, Nordic Solutions, and Clean Denmark, and of course also the organizer at the Circular City Weeks. And with that, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Rune Kurt. And Rune, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
And you're the CEO of the Danish Curtin Thompson, which is an innovation design consultancy. And what I found most interesting is your test lab, where you can take what seems like blue sky ideas down to realistic level through collaboration with experts. And you're also board member of the Design Denmark. So you've been part of developing this prosumer energy network. And so my first question would be, what is a prosumer?
Yes, yeah, thank you for the introduction, and glad to be part of this panel as well. Really looking forward to this discussion. Yeah, so in short, like a prosumer, it's like a old term in that sense, and in the energy world, it's or in any context, it's the mix of a producer and a consumer. So prosumer mixed together. And of course, when you look into like the energy system, it's going away from the more conventional theme where you have maybe like big providers, energy utilities that are providing energy to individual consumers, and maybe this is starting to go the other way as well. So yeah, that's in short.
So the consumer becomes producer as well. Is that kind of the idea? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now with also more. Yeah, yes. With more renewables, it becomes more present.
Yeah. And I know you want to tell us more about the prosumer energy network and the concept. So please, I know you will share some slides with us.
Exactly. So I'll just share my screen here. So yeah, I will just show you this concept of the prosumer energy network. It's actually like something that we helped co-create in this Helsinki challenge that was put out in earlier this year or earlier last year. And there was a lot of Nordic companies, especially Swedish and Danish companies together. You see some of them here, all from technologies providers to some organizations and financial bodies as well. And essentially, the challenge was about how to become carbon neutral Helsinki. And very specific in the heating sector, they had to shut down some of the big power plants. They had to shut it down. You can see it here in 4 years or 3 years. It is now in 24, and the other one in 29. So in less than 10 years, they have to transit the energy system of how to consume and produce heat. And the solution that we provided in this challenge were consisting of multiple layers, and you could say that that's also where the prosumer concept, of course, comes in. And when you look at it on the larger scale, it's something about how data becomes more relevant. So you have some aggregating services, and you have things in the cloud, artificial service management and control systems connected with some software devices that help control and monitor who are producing and who are consuming, and where can this production and consumption go. But it's also on the infrastructure scale, so that it's that you organize your system in a way so you can have several degrees of the temperature in your system, and that it fits into that. So you, for instance, have like a high temperature degree, 90, 80 degrees, and all the way down to 20 degrees, and where it fits the best. And if you look in it more from like the production level, it should come from a lot of these heating generation technologies, as hot boilers, and that comes from the seawater and wastewater and geothermal, but also something that comes from you could say electricity generation that goes into to some of these heat pumps and supplied with the green electricity. And in order to have this system, you also need to have some storage solution, so you can levelize in the right ways when the consumption is high and production might be low. Yeah, this is put in another way how it would reduce production or carbon emissions over the years. There's another level as well where you also need to engage some of these communities. So, for instance, starting creating some energy communities where it's not only the individual building, but it's maybe like a smaller area, a smaller district that are then exchanging services, or from district to district. So you have special smaller agreements, more decentralized. And then there comes also these other not so technical layers into it. There's the financial layer and there's a risk layer that I'll just present in one bit. So where you actually get like the financial bodies into this game, and we were trying to introduce some of the Nordic banks that then can help provide like what we call like a green bond framework for introducing these many technologies as a renewable energy storage, these energy efficiency solutions combined with the IoT or the software solutions. So it doesn't become like one big chaotic system. And also, in order to get these investors on board and get these final institutions comfortable with the investment, we introduced like a 8 steps to help minimize your risk, so that you will be sure that this is the way that you go through every time, both when you look from the technology providers, but also when you look from the investor institutions. So this should help making more stakeholders in the process more comfortable with both with the investment and also the production afterwards. And that's actually, yeah, in short, the concept and also the reason why to do it.
Yeah. So what are the benefits with this concept compared to others?
Yeah, so of course the benefit is that first of all it helps solve the challenge of being carbon neutral. So if you're a city and you have to go carbon neutral, this is a way that you can do that in a more decentralized way. And it also helps actually comply with some of the challenges of these renewables that are fluctuating all the time. How you get that system into play in a right way, because that's one of the big challenges as well when you want to go carbon neutral with the renewable technologies. That the wind are blowing when there's nobody consuming energy, or the sun is there when people is at work and not in nighttime. So you need to make these things comply together, and that's another benefit. And of course, the whole green bond of the financial things, so that you actually get it in place. You get like a full solution. That's that's some of the benefits.
Yeah, and I've been hearing you telling us about this. I also think that for adapting this to a city, you can also choose some part of the concept. You don't have to use the whole concept. You can use some of the technology, some of the financing part, some of the insurance, and so on. I guess that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could mix it up if you don't want to get everything in once. Yeah.
So involve the local technology providers, etc., as well. So, yeah. And
Yeah.
in a New York context, how could this be adopted?
Yeah, so that actually bridged very well into what you're just saying there, because maybe in a New York context, that is actually what you might want to do if you more like go on. As I understand it, it's you're maybe going more like on an individual building scale rather than like the full city scale, where you could see in the Nordics setup here, you have maybe a tendency to get something from the system level, like more like top down. Solutions that fits everything, and where in New York maybe you want to more develop in each individual plot or each individual building owner. And this is of course something that then you could mix some of these technologies, take some of the heat pumps and mix it into together with some of it, if you want to also have solar in the specific building mixed with some IT system surveillance network that then yeah, saying when should you sell your energy and when should you buy from other ones when the prices are low. So
Yes.
I think that would be the mix into the New York context. But that's probably also Adam and Benjamin would had something more to say at this take.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that question. Thank you, Rune. And now I would like to introduce our second panelist, Helena. Are you with us? And can you hear us?
Yes, I am.
Can
you hear me?
Yes, we can. And Helena, you're the founder of the Swedish company Urban Design, and you're working in the nexus really between architecture, energy, building, technology, and civil engineering. And what I understand, you really want to highlight energy buildings and urban infrastructure as an essential part of the city, as well as an underutilized potential for the creation of civic spaces. And just to mention, you've also been an assistant professor at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, KTH. And just to mention also that Urban Design have been the winners of the American Architecture Prize in 2017 for the design of the plant for district energy in Stockholm. So, and Helena, the district energy network in Stockholm is what I understand a concrete example of Prosumer energy network. And could you please give us an overview on how the networks look like in Stockholm, the vision behind the development, and the owner structure?
Yes, I can. First of all, thanks for being invited. I think this is super interesting. So on energy networks, there are actually several energy networks because we have district heating, we have district cooling, electricity, and also gas. And part of these can be used for the Prosumer structure. For example, district heating and electricity, where you can have heat exchange and you can have solar panel that produces energy and feeds into it. But basically, what Stockholm has is a huge district heating network that's actually combined out of several smaller networks that have been connected over time. So there are three main networks now selling and buying hot water basically from each other. And they have been connected like since, I think they started building this in the 50s, and the last 10 or 15 years it's been really connected over a vast area. And what we have in Stockholm is that we produce a lot of our heat with combined heat and power plants, which means that you can use the excess heat when you produce electricity, and then you can send the hot water out into the system. And since the buildings, the housing in Stockholm, ever since let's say the 40s or the 30s and 40s have been like the singular houses and the apartments are heated with a water-based system. So it's been easy to connect and to use the water. And one of the good things with district heating is also that you can use from high temperatures down to low temperatures. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and so it's been developed since the 50s, so maybe it's hard for you to talk about the challenges from the beginning, but could you mention some challenges about the development of the network?
I think when you're building an energy network, you have both physical and economical challenges. So Stockholm is a city that is built on water. It's actually an archipelago where you have both a big lake and you have the Baltic Sea. So our our geography is a challenge in itself. We have a lot of bedrock. It's very heavy or hilly. So just to build it it's difficult. But then you also have to have the challenges of actually having a common goal about how you want to do this. So you need to have a common goal among city planners and among politicians. And I think that's what we have had here. So and one thing that's very I think one of the things that has led to the success in Stockholm is that you don't start with like this big vision that you should heat every building with this. You started off in small parts and then you gradually build it up over time. I think that's a good thing. The challenge, of course, has been also that we started off with a very social democratic structure with one owner, one planner, and then during the last 30 years, it's been privatized. So now we have like different companies producing the heat, another company producing electricity or gas, and then you have other companies that are actually distributing it. Sometimes they are private companies, sometimes they're co-owned with the municipalities, but there is a mixture. So you need to have like a structure that can handle this buying and selling of energy.
Mm. And if you look now, this is our first discussion and experience sharing between Sweden and the Nordics and New York. But do you think that some of these parts could be adapted to the New York market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, I think it's important that you have a very clear idea about how you want to use the energy, because you have different energy sources for different needs. So when you produce electricity in a power plant, you get excess heat. So it's smart to use that hot water to heat the buildings rather than to use the electricity to heat them. And the same goes for cooling, especially like if you have a free source of cold water, which we have here, and also that you have in New York because you have the ocean, you can use heat exchangers or this district cooling system, district cooling network. So you don't need to use the electricity to cool the buildings. So by sort of dividing the energy up into like the best way to distribute it, you can keep the electricity for where it's best needed, like to run cars in the future and computers and electronic stuff. So, but also one thing that's important is that you need to have an incentive. You need to have a common goal about how to do this. And money can be a good incentive, but there need to be like a long-term commitment of some sort, because the technical lifespan of a district heating network is really long. So the investment doesn't pay back until after several years. So there has to be some sort of guarantee that the investor will get his or her money back.
So you need a vision, a clear vision, but then don't start with a too big job. You can work on different parts and then put them together. And which stakeholders is needed to be to be part of the discussion or the deployment of a district energy network, in your opinion?
First of all, you need to have the city planning department with you, because if you want to, when you want to supply district heating, for example, it actually takes quite a lot of space. So you need to have them with you. And of course, you need to have the energy production companies. That's really important, but also like real estate owners and real estate developers, so that they build the buildings with a distribution that is not based solely on gas and electricity. So that's super important. And also, like in Stockholm, we have a lot of heat exchange, for example. So if you have a water-based distribution system of heat, you can also take the excess heat from sewage water, for example. So it's not only the heating water that is supplied by the district heating, it's also the tap water. So when I take a shower, the hot water will go into the sewage, and then there will be a heat exchange with the sewage treatment plant. It sort of sends energy back, and also there are cooperation with server halls, for example, where they need to cool it, so you can feed the energy back.
So there are many stakeholders that needs to be involved in this, but I guess they speak different languages, and then they have different targets and ambitions. So how could they work together to really achieve a change and this structuring?
You need to have this common goal, like a collective wish to have a better, cleaner, more environmentally friendly and reliable society with reliable energy. And I think that's created by people actually talking to each other and see that you need a whole community to go somewhere. And then it's really important to have, like, money-wise, it's organized. It needs to be like economically sound. So you also need to have a legal structure that sort of doesn't change every second year. So if you make a huge investment, you need to know that you will get your money back, and the taxes are not going to be going up and down, or the regulation will change every 5 years or so. So you need to have the political and the economical and the public walking in the same direction.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists from the New York side. We do have Adam Friberg and Benjamin Rodney with us. Good morning.
Morning.
And Adam, you are leading the work at Buro Happold's Cities team in North America. And Buro Happold is what I understand that you want to deliver a green recovery that is healthy, sustainable, and fair. And you do that through 26 locations worldwide. And Adam, you have really been crucial to some of the most progressive planning efforts in North America, including the first ever Los Angeles countrywide sustainability plan, as well as New York City's 1.5 degrees climate action plan. And Benjamin, you are president-elect at ASHRAE New York, and you're also vice president for construction at Hines. And for our non-US friends, ASHRAE stands for American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And Hines is a privately owned global real estate investment organization, development and management firms, and one of the largest and most respected real estate organizations in the world. And what comes into my mind is that you're really a pioneering, you have a pioneering commitment to sustainability. And Adam and Benjamin, you have now heard Rune's and Helena's dialogue on Prosumer Energy Network, and with a concrete example from Stockholm. What is your initial thoughts? Adam, would you like to begin?
Sorry, my audio is going in and out. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just raise your hand if you can't. I think it's really important. I mean, first and foremost, there's other cities out there that are doing this, other places in the world that are doing this. That's the first most important thing. But New York State and New York City have very ambitious goals. New York State has the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And New York City had 80 by 50 at 1.5 degrees. They have fairly ambitious targets, and now local law 97. Um, Add that with natural gas and the issues associated with natural gas, whether it's the supply of or the safety issues associated with it, and you have a lot of things happening that needs to get done. Fortunately, um, you know, adding community energy networks is was a very big part of 80 by 50, and it's a big part of 1.5 degrees. um, Unfortunately, New York City is a fairly difficult place to do a lot of this stuff. Not to say it can't happen. It's just, it's good. It's one of the worst places I would say to pilot anything. But if you can pilot it in New York City, you can pilot it anywhere.
Mm.
Um, and the other important thing is that, in this case, what we're really doing is diversifying, different fuel sources, and that's important, especially as we transition and we get to carbon neutrality. We're going to need a number of fuel sources to get there, and it's going to help out in resilience purposes as well because you're having different types of fuel sources. So I think it's a great opportunity there. Now, on the consumer side, it's even a bigger. This is America. It's capitalism, right? You're providing this prosumer network could create new markets for anything. If there's non-fungible sources, non-fungible, Bitcoin funding happening all over the place with buying whatever, you can figure this out. Fortunately, blockchain, is involved in the Brooklyn microgrid project, which is a very small microgrid project in Brooklyn right now, selling basically it's a prosumer network allowing folks that generate electricity via solar to sell that electricity on the market to other consumers that want that electricity. And so there is a small example in New York, and all this would be was a much larger example with a lot more parties involved. But I absolutely feel that this is a wonderful opportunity, and more important, it needs to happen. It really does, for us to reach our carbon neutrality goals, unless
Yeah.
fusion
So if
occurs
I
overnight.
so I should summarize your ideas here, Adam, is that a consumer network is appealing to the New York market because it has a commercial side to it, but it will be very difficult because it's New York market is very filled with
Complicated.
barriers. Complicated.
Let's call it
Yeah.
that. It's
And
complicated.
Benjamin, do you agree? What's your view on this?
I agree. The New York market is very large and complicated. Yes, but no, I appreciate you having me here today. And I think the biggest reason that I wanted to be involved with this conversation and make sure that this was broadcast to our members and to folks in New York is absolutely for awareness, to make sure that they know that there's things going on in other parts of the world, in other places, in the Nordics. Where solutions are being developed that might be able to help us here, to make sure that we're looking outside of just our city and where we are, for solutions that are going to help us meet 80 by 50, meet the local law 97, avoid fines, things like that. So, and meet our climate goals and decarbonization goals, because it's a daunting task. And just throwing out some numbers. I mean, for the New York market, I mean, we have, let's see, 50,000 buildings over 25,000 square feet, which make up about 60% of the building square footage, which still leaves about 40% of the square footage left in smaller buildings, to try to end with a goal of getting all that to be 70% renewable by 2030. And I wanted to shout out to my colleague Mike Izzo, who's going to be speaking tomorrow on some solutions that we're implementing in individual buildings. But let's see, we have about 70% of the energy for New York City. And Adam, if you notice any of this is incorrect, let me know. But about 70% of the energy for our city comes from fossil fuels, whereas upstate it's maybe 80 to 90% renewable, along those lines. But so you still need, and to transmit that energy becomes a big problem. So the question is, if you can then create that energy locally, however we're going to do that, you then can avoid some of those transmission problems. Now, how do you do that down here? Well, I mean, Helena, you said it great. You don't need to start with the big vision. Can be daunting, right? I mean, we have 8 million people in this city, all those, all these buildings. And so it's like, oh my God, where do we even start? Well, being able to break it down into these smaller solutions, thinking about it for our members and for our owners on your own projects in your own districts, the one solution, the one thing that we can do, and then building it together. I mean, you said it started in the 50s in Stockholm, and then you had 3 separate systems that all combined together, right? That created your district system. You didn't just start and say, we're going to build a district system and do it in 10 years. So it's to make sure that folks in New York understand that you can do this by looking at your own individual projects, working with your owners, working with your principals, and just getting informed, talking to people outside of your own network, outside of your own circle, to come up with some solutions. And then I think, I can't remember if it was Renee or Helena, but just talking about that incentive and the passion to want to make a difference in that way. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to do that when you have all the different players, like you said, in a complicated city, whether it's Con Edison, the New York City itself, bringing NYSERDA into the fold, city council, the mayor's office, changing administrations, changing goals. Each of us as individuals can have our own passion to try to come up with solutions on projects we're working on individually. And then once all that combines together, there's going to be sort of a flywheel effect, and you see it happening. But that was my biggest reason for being on here, is to help, raise awareness and make sure people know that it's going to take time, but we don't need to figure everything out all at once.
So you like the Prosumer energy network concept because we can show it that it shows that it's possible to have a net zero energy system, and start small is your advice, and really create energy locally. But let's touch on these challenges that you are talking about before we getting into the other question, because both Adam and you Benjamin, raised that then the New York market is very difficult. So please, could you touch on these challenges so for our audience?
Do you want to start, Ben, or do you want me to start?
You can go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's utilities, right? So we have 2 different gas utilities in New York, 3 if you want to. Yeah, 2 different gas utilities. One big electric utility, and I would say 2 if you want to add in the Rockaways as well. Who uses Long Island's utility, and the Rockaways might be a good opportunity for water source, heat pump systems right next to the ocean. You have a bay as well. You have, as Ben mentioned, all the agencies, and all those agencies need to be coordinated on something like this. And coordinating agencies isn't the easiest task in the world. Unfortunately, as Elena mentioned, city planning is involved in that coordination. Their capital projects folks. But as soon as you're potentially ripping up road for pipe, you have to deal with DOT. You have to deal with potentially Con Edison, their right of ways. There's IT infrastructure right of ways. A lot of right of way ownership. Who owns it? That becomes an issue. And then you have what's important is some of these things do exist in Europe. There are cooperatives between real estate developers, real estate companies, owners. So that's how you can kind of build along that network. But it is complicated. And then you have the state as well, and the state has to regulate the utilities. And if you become a utility potentially, then you have to involve the PSC, Public Service Commission, at the state level, to determine how that might be regulated or not. It really, in some cases, laws might need to be changed. It's not regulations might need to be changed. It's not far out there. They've been thinking about this for a while now. Really at the microgrid level, the electric level, but now they have a lot of work to do. They have hundreds of buildings to transform in the next 30 years, hundreds of buildings per day in the next 30 years that they need to basically decarbonize. So if it's the changing laws, then that's what's going to have to happen. And there's going to be some thought put there. But there's a lot of complication in the New York market. The important thing is that there's some serious issues that will impact cost, such as natural gas prices in the future, and the safety associated with that. And there's some real opportunities in New York City. A lot of that's highlighted in the community energy planning map that was under by 50 and updated recently by MOS. But there are some good opportunities that you can see, and we just need to get started, right? And we need progressive developers and real estate companies to really move us in that direction, and city support.
So many stakeholders, different levels from the city side and also the state side, and the regulations. And Benjamin, would you like to add some challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is getting that renewable power from wherever it is to where it's needed. And if you can create more of that locally, even on the small scale. I mean, Adam brought up that Brooklyn microgrid, which is great. I mean, just people sharing energy with each other. But if we're gonna we're trying to electrify all the buildings. We're trying to bring electric cars online with all the major manufacturers saying that they're going to stop making gas vehicles by 2025 and be all electric. And everybody knows New Yorkers love their cars and parking them wherever they can. We're going to need to support that. And right now, the sources we have, for the most part, are fossil fuel sources. And so if we can maybe think about getting people more in this prosumer mindset, this microgrid mindset, this alternative energy mindset on a smaller scale, because it's such a large, I mean, it's like, I think Adam was talking about moving an ocean liner versus a small boat the other day or something like that. Trying to move that small boat becomes extremely difficult, but trying to move, a little boat so that you can just power your own little area, maybe power the cars in one area, or might be more of a achievable solution in the short term while we're trying to work out the bigger solutions over the next 10 years. So I want to make sure that people that are hearing this from New York are saying, hey, just start thinking more in this mindset when you're designing projects, when you're working with owners, things like that.
Helena and Rooney, would you like to comment on Adam's and Benjamin's dialogue here, the challenges?
I have to start by saying we have 3 different network owners that have their own selling and buying and selling, but each network are made up of maybe 100 connected microgrids. So we really started with a lot of them. And I think it was super interesting to hear everything you said, and as you said, the big challenge is to go from fossil fuel to renewable, and then you need to think about, is that something you do in microgrids? Would you promote the solar panels and use the batteries of the cars as batteries to sort of feed directly into, or do you build up also large combined heat and power plants that you can shift to biofuel, for example? And I think you need to mix big solutions and small solutions, and then think about the distribution.
It's going to be a mix. Yeah, and Benjamin brought this up too. It's going to be a mix, but having a lot of these distributed systems, it's better for resilience purposes. That's the most important thing. Relying on one centralized system, if that fails and there's a lot of points of failure there, then everybody's basically without power, without energy. So having a distributed system as is a better system. It's going to it might be a little bit more complicated from the start, but it's actually a better system because you have a little bit more diversity in where you're getting your fuel sources from. It's that simple.
Rune?
Yeah. I think it's of course a very hyper complex this New York context. But yeah, I think as well it makes me think of that we earlier discovered some drivers, you could say, of where different energy futures might go, and where you have like on one axis like the market versus the societal level, and on the other axis centralized versus decentralized. And I think as well, like I very much agree with Adam that it's, or I think everybody mentioned it, that it would be a mix of these, but maybe it's more towards the market-driven forces, especially in this context, but both centralized and decentralized. And I think probably something beside having incentives to do this is also to have very good examples. So there's probably like this microgrid that Adam was mentioning, and if there can be other types of these like flagship projects that, for instance, the city of New York would help support in the development, and then also promote, because that would probably be something that would help broaden out the big things. And yeah, I think as well, also if you can start, yeah, I think there's something about like urban farming as well, especially in New York or some of the US cities where you have so many different rooftop and surfaces. So maybe that's also something that you can think into, like this mindset that it's not only like electricity and heat consumption directly. It's actually more maybe linked into something that you help consume, like farming goods in that sense. And also maybe getting some larger corporates into it. In this decentralized world, we were thinking of IKEA, for instance, or other like major cooperatives that maybe are generating fully their own energy, and then are supplying also like a whole district with these services, rather than it's like a lot of individual ones at one time. So yeah, so that was some of my thoughts.
So how could the Nordics be supportive of the transition in New York when it comes to heating and cooling? If you want to work together, how could that be? What could be the next step?
Oh, that's a good question. Should we ask the Americans or the Nordic people?
Well, I mean, I personally think it's just starting these conversations. I mean, just getting, to meet you, Helena, and you, Renee, and you, Anne Sophie, and then having, met Will, who's Anne Sophie's colleague, and my colleague Mike, just kind of opening my eyes to say, hey, what else is going on out there that we aren't doing, and starting that conversation, learning, expanding your network of the right people to talk to, because sometimes you just think, I don't even know who to talk to even think about this. Well, here's an event. Here's some folks that are, thinking about this, that have knowledge on these subjects, and I mean that's why I did this, and that's what I thought was a good start, to be honest. Because until you have that passion and knowledge and interest, there's, I mean, nothing's going to go anywhere. So I think this is a good start.
So knowledge sharing, continue our dialogue.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I remember. I mean, I always say that one of the most important things is just actually visiting places like Stockholm, and you can see the systems firsthand, and you're like, oh wow, they're doing it here, and when things come up like water source, water using the river water for cooling, for example. And we have some examples here in North America on Lakeside, and also even in New York City in the past. But people say, well, what about the ecology? And it's like, well, they're doing it. They have just inlets that can fluctuate elevation, and they're not like ecologically wrong. Like they have it figured out, and it's really important now more than ever. Because once again, we have specific laws, policies in place. We have a lot of other drivers that are basically changing this landscape, that we need to have. We need to have international examples. We need to have examples that somebody's done this out there, and there's knowledge out there that can be shared, so that it can happen in your city, in your town. Because once again, we're running out of time.
As soon as we can travel again, I want to invite you.
Thank you. Thank you. But it's there's some great examples. I would say like 10 years ago in this, and especially in my business, like people, a lot of clients said, oh, well, that's, them, but this is different. This is the US. It's like, no, we need this now. We're running out of time. And we need to get this moving now. We need the expertise, that has the people that have the knowledge to do these systems. And more important too, for investing purposes, we need to reduce that discount rate. We need to show that these things aren't risky. In fact, prove that these things are a lot less risky than some of the fossil fuel distribution networks that we have in this country, in this city. So I think that it's really important, to knowledge share, and I think that's really the only way this is going to get done correctly. That's just a fact. We need that expertise, we need that experience, and then we need people here to be trained, in that, to be able to manage these types of systems, to be able to install heat pump systems, and maintain heat pump systems, for example, and maintain these networks.
Rune?
Yeah, yeah, I think as well. Like, of course, like the infrastructure might be different from city to city and from country to country, but yeah, it's exactly the same challenges that all energy sources are starting to be mixed together, and like, yeah, production and consumption are also starting to mix together, and there's more actors coming into this whole flow. And yeah, the best way is to share knowledge around that, and also having this similar language, because when you are so many different stakeholders with different professions speaking different languages, not only like the as the normal language, but like technical languages. Then it's very important to have both like the physical examples, but also like having visual examples. There's another example actually also here in Copenhagen that you should pass by if you go to the Nordics on the way to Stockholm. There's also a living lab of where they have mixed a lot of different both heat pumps technology, big heat pumps, small heat pumps, grid batteries, charging solutions, and so on in this sort of a living lab in a new built district. And I think there's many other cities around Europe where they're doing these things. So this is definitely the best way, because yeah, if everybody is inventing the new solution, then it's maybe wasting a lot of energy that can go into like building a more solid solution together and scaling it up, because scaling up is also another key here, that if some of these goals need to be met within the next 10 years or 30 years, depending on the scale, then it really needs to go fast, and the value chain need to collaborate together, whether it's on buildings or infrastructure or other things.
Yes, I will open up now for questions from our audience. I can't see that there is any question in the chat, but please. Yes.
I have a question from somebody
Good.
who couldn't get into the chat.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And his question is, are there any test beds in New York? So
There are
I guess
incubators. I mean, there are incubators, but I would say, test beds. There are incubators, there's some pilots, but nothing. There are definitely, a number of kind of clean energy incubators. But I would say something of the scale of what we're mentioning, maybe in Denmark, even what I've seen, like the Philadelphia microgrid project at the Navy Yard, for example. Nothing of that scale that I can think of. There are, Stony Brook has some clean energy out in Long Island, for example. They have some kind of clean energy pilots as well. There are a number of pilots, let's say, but in terms of test bed of like being able to test all these technologies in one location, I would say I can't think of any off the top of my head, not that I'm aware of. Not to say it might exist somewhere in the state. But I think that's a very important part. Being able to showcase these technologies and show people how less intrusive it is, and less air pollution it can cause, and a lot of other, and how easy it is to maintain in some cases. I think that would be a great idea.
Also, Asfi, I would like to say something. when we can travel again, it would be an honor to show you around in Stockholm, and maybe we could also do one more of these because I would also like to show you like the buildings, the devices, the production and transportation facilities that we have. Like, for example, we have designed this biofueled combined heat and power plant that is in the middle of Stockholm. It actually sits in a housing area from the early 1900s, and we have oaks and lawns, and people can actually have a picnic, like catch the facade of the power plant at the same time. And we have pumping stations for district heating with playgrounds on top of them, and electrical facilities that have parks, like offering the public something. I think that's also something really important, that you need to see that the production and distribution of energy is not something that's dirty and you don't pollute. It's clean, it's safe, it's friendly. So,
and also
But-
the possibilities with financing. There are many vehicles or tools for deep green financing for projects like this that we are talking about. So that could also be a topic for another event like this.
Elena, is that run by the city, or is that privately operated, or is it being used as sort of a way to showcase equipment to sell it, or is it just or who? How is that set up?
It's different. As they're owned by different companies, but for example, this big combined heat and power plant, that's owned by a company that's part owned by the city and part private owned. And it's been a development with the city planning department to be able to build this in the middle of the city. Now they needed to do a beautiful building that was like green and looked both served was and looked nice. Was green and looked green. So, and when they started that, they closed down the old coal fueled one. So it was actually a big shift. Also, I think the equivalent of all the traffic in Stockholm for 1.5 months, the same amount of fuels or exhausts, the CO2 footprint got down. So and sometimes it's because if you want to build something like a pumping station, for example, it's built by a private or a partly private owned company, but you build it on city ground because you need to have a location that's good for the technical reasons. And maybe you're in the middle of the park. So how do you persuade the city to be able to build something in the middle of a park? Well, for example, you build a playground on top of it, or you make it into a really big, nice bench on one of the facades where you can overlook a fountain or something. So it's always this. It's in a cooperation with the city that owns the land and the company that might be private.
Right.
We do have 2 messages in the forum. It says one is organize a one-day workshop to brainstorm different possible scenarios for New York. So that's one message, and the other one is New York State's governor talked about a New York testbed with Brooklyn microgrid last year. So
It's a good project. I mean, like, yeah, I have a long story about them, but I think it's a really good success story of being able to use an innovative approach to actually buying and selling, selling electricity from renewables that we weren't really able to do beforehand. And I remember when it first started, a lot of the utilities were just like, "Whoa, what are they up to?" And because it's very innovative. And once again, it's an example, and that's a really big start in New York.
okay, thank you. And I will try to summarize our dialogue. And one important message is that stakeholders dialogue seems to be the key here. And also seeing is believing. Like if you see it with your own eyes, then you understand that it's possible. And knowledge sharing is also really a key, but also that the US needs to have national examples of successful cases. And start small is also another key message here today. And also that from a financial side, that this kind of new system is not risky from a financial perspective. And we need a similar language between stakeholders as well. And even if we start small, we need to have models that can be scaled up. And yeah, we brought up the demonstrators test beds, but we should look into that and also have a new one-day workshop to brainstorm further. So thank you for that. And would you like to end up the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great, and I appreciate you hosting this, Anne-Sophie. I mean, I don't think the idea of this presentation was to come up with all the solutions. It was to make sure that people are inspired to go out and do their own research and come up with ideas and create their own knowledge base and then bring it back to their peers as well. I mean, that's how I think that's probably the whole point of Circular City Week New York. I mean, every single event isn't necessarily to solve the problems, it's to create awareness and then get people out there. I mean, they've doubled their events from last year to this year, I think, from 40 to 45 events to 90 events. I mean, the calendar is ridiculously packed. And I think from the Danish Clean Tech Hub, I think they've done a good job of that. So just encourage everyone to go out and start doing your own research, talking to others in the industry, and go from there.
Good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been really interesting to get a peek at the situation in New York City.
Well, you're welcome to come out here as well. It's not like to do it just yet.
Yeah.
Welcome to come out. We'll show you all around. So,
Okay.
all right. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.